if recently in the UK when we had our election, if it's not maybe quite the same because it doesn't have quite the same reach, but I guess it's a similar sort of demographic that we're sort of talking about here that you really want to attain the support of in an election is vital. It'd be like if Jeremy Clarkson supported Jeremy Corbyn and came out, like the kind of reaction that would have across like the mid, like, you know, the 40-year-old like boomer dads that would have fucking voted Conservative because they couldn't stand the likes of Jeremy Corbyn. Otherwise, if someone like Jeremy Clarkson had then switched and fucking changed his mind to endorse someone like that, and then everyone that was like in Momentum and like all the young whippersnappers were like, oh, Jeremy Clarkson is a chauvinistic man beast, and his support makes me hate Jeremy Corbyn now.
But that's the thing, he is a fucking chauvinistic man beast, but that doesn't mean he can't evolve.
That's that's the whole point of this fucking essentialism bullshit. Like, it's literally like, the reason why they believe that Bernie Sanders going on to Joe Rogan means Bernie Sanders is compromising his beliefs is because they don't believe people can change.
Exactly.
The only thing you can do is concede things to the awful people, so the awful people will vote for you and you can sneak in the good things. But that's not how anything works. People are not essential good, essential bad. People are all over the place, not thinking about like they don't have Richard Spencer's political goals.
No.
Like, Joe Rogan doesn't have political goals, period, I would argue. This is a man who just literally says whatever he thinks is going to be interesting. Like, he's trying to get his guests to talk more. Like, that's how that show works. He's like Howard Stern. It's not some like fucking magic new thing where because he's like a crypto Nazi or something, he's become more popular than anyone else. This guy's got 11 million people listening to him, and they're just like random people. They're not of any specific demographic. They're a lot of different things, and that's exactly what he is, and they're not necessarily consistent. And for him to take 5 months to think about Bernie Sanders and then announce, hey, I'm voting for Bernie Sanders, is like a really big deal, because these are not people who think things out in that way, generally speaking.
There are actually people who are registered Republicans who are in the Joe Rogan subreddit right now saying that they're going to vote Bernie in the Democratic primary.
That's pretty big.
Pretty big thing. That's a huge thing, because at the end of the day, like, you know, this sort of essentialism that comes from the liberal class is, you know, it's meant to justify hatred towards everyone else, just everyday people. The idea
it's a supremacy ideology.
It is.
I mean, it's just, I'm better than them.
Exactly, and therefore they don't deserve to have access or a decent quality and standard of life. It's so funny how all this piety and all of these so-called altruistic principles fly out of the window even when a chance at redemption is made available. I think a lot of people forget that, you know, our job as the left is to spread class consciousness. That's our fucking job.
And diseases.
And diseases.
But to go back to what Jake was saying regarding like a Jeremy Clarkson endorsement type deal, you have to think about how, like, for example, my dad, he really likes Sargon of Akkad. And he also wanted to vote Conservative. Now, if Sargon of Akkad, by some miracle, was like, oh, I support Jeremy Corbyn, that wouldn't move my dad at all. He'd just be like, well, Sargon's probably a fool. So you have to think about how these supposed alt-right Nazi followers of Joe Rogan, do you really think him voting for Bernie would actually affect those people?
Probably
what
not.
What we're talking about is Joe Rogan viewers who are at least vaguely sympathetic to...
well-meaning. Like, that's how I always put it.
Yeah.
Like, people's political ideologies might not necessarily be Marxist or, like, leftist, but they're at least well-meaning.
Like, the thing that people realize is that a lot of his... And I know so many people who are like this, people who are like... you know, people who are into conspiracy, or people who are like into art and weird ideas, or like fucking DMT or whatever, who are generally kind of dissatisfied with the neoliberal status quo in 2016. but who aren't bad people and who still have altruistic values, but they're just kind of sick of the way that neoliberalism has distorted identity politics and social justice, even though they may not necessarily consciously be aware of the fact that it's the neoliberal recuperation that they're upset about. And those people are looking for answers. They're looking for an alternative. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to be reactionary, but I also don't want to fucking go and join the like screeching SJW types either. Where do I go? And as the left, it's our job to arm those people with class consciousness and to do the hard work of unrecuperating what has been recuperated in our society. That's our job. And I feel like BreadTube TM, I think it was a big mistake. Fucking huge, fucking, I think it was a huge mistake because it basically armed liberals with the language of anti-fascism. And instead of them to use it for its original radical purpose, which is challenging the structural problems that bring about reaction, they used it as a weapon to bludgeon people with, as a way of making themselves seem morally superior and elite over people, and as a way of writing off people who could otherwise be useful and who would otherwise be sympathetic. I think that the language of academia, of academic radical movements, the language of academic socialism, the language of academic anti-fascism has been also recuperated and perverted by a certain subset of influencers and people with large platforms who don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
No,
they have no fucking idea what they're talking about. Half of the time, it's just like, those people over there are bad and we're better. And we need to show them that we're better. And the thing is, okay, what are we going to do with the bad people? Like you said in your video, are we going to shove them in a cave and like give them pizza every day? Just like put a pizza in there every day?
I'm so good because I'm even showing mercy to the bads.